As the gentle twilight settles over the vast Mississippi River Valley, let your mind drift back through the mists of time to discover one of history's most remarkable secrets, a magnificent city that once thrived in the heart of North America, larger than London, more sophisticated than anything Europeans would build on this continent for centuries to come, yet so completely forgotten that most Americans today have never heard its name. Tonight, we journey to Cahokia, the lost metropolis that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient America. Close your eyes and allow the soft whispers of prairie winds to carry you back nearly 1,000 years, to a time when the greatest city north of Mexico rose from the fertile floodplains of the Mississippi, where tens of thousands of people lived, worked, and celebrated in harmony with the rhythms of the great river that sustained their remarkable civilization. Picture yourself floating gently above the American bottom, that rich expanse of bottomland where three great rivers converge, the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois, creating one of the most fertile regions in all of North America. The year is 1100 CE, and spread before you like a dream made manifest in earth and timber lies a city that defies every assumption about pre-Columbian America. Massive earthen pyramids rise from carefully planned plazas, their flat tops crowned with temples and elite residences that overlook a bustling metropolis where people from across the continent have gathered to create something unprecedented in North American history. The city we call Cahokia covers more than 5 square miles of meticulously planned urban space, home to perhaps 20,000 souls at its peak, making it larger than London, Paris, or any other European city of its time. Yet this was not a European city at all, but an indigenous American achievement that emerged from the sophisticated Mississippian culture, a civilization that understood urban planning, monumental architecture, and complex social organization centuries before Columbus dreamed of sailing west across the Atlantic. The heart of this magnificent city rises Monk's Mound, a colossal earthen pyramid that staggers the imagination even today. Built entirely by human hands carrying baskets of soil, this monument covers 14 acres at its base, larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and rises in 4 terraces to a height of 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain. From its summit, the rulers of Cahokia could survey their domain, watching the daily life of their people unfold in the plazas and neighborhoods spread below, while keeping watch over the river highways that brought traders and pilgrims from across the continent. The Grand Plaza stretches before Monk's Mound like a vast outdoor cathedral, covering 50 acres of carefully leveled and maintained ground where 10,000 people or more could gather for the great festivals and ceremonies that were central to Cahokian life. Imagine the spectacle of these gatherings. Thousands of people dressed in their finest clothing, their faces painted for celebration, dancing and singing while the smoke of cooking fires carries the aroma of feasts prepared from the bounty of river, prairie, and forest. This was a city built for celebration rather than warfare, a peaceful metropolis that achieved its greatness through cooperation, trade, and the magnetic power of its religious and cultural festivals. Unlike the fortified cities that characterized much of the medieval world, early Cahokia rose without defensive walls, its confidence resting not on military might but on the prosperity and spiritual authority that made it the acknowledged center of Mississippian civilization. The people who built this remarkable city came from many different backgrounds, drawn by opportunity, spiritual calling, and the simple human desire to be part of something magnificent. Archaeological evidence suggests that Cahokians spoke multiple languages and maintained connections with communities across vast distances, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic coastal plain. This cosmopolitan character made Cahokia not just a city but a melting pot where diverse Native American cultures blended to create something entirely new. The sophistication of Cahokian urban planning would have impressed any medieval European visitor. The city was laid out in a diamond pattern oriented to the cardinal directions, with residential neighborhoods, craft districts, and ceremonial areas carefully zoned according to function and social status. The planners understood drainage, creating systems that managed the periodic flooding of the Mississippi while channeling fresh water to residential areas and workshops throughout the urban core. Daily life in Cahokia revolved around the agricultural abundance that the fertile bottomlands provided. Vast fields of corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters that formed the foundation of Mississippian agriculture, stretched across the floodplain, tended by farming communities that supplied the urban population with food surpluses that supported craft specialists, religious personnel, and the elaborate ceremonial life that made Cahokia famous throughout ancient America. The city's workshops produced goods that were traded across half a continent. Skilled artisans crafted distinctive pottery, copper ornaments, stone tools, and shell beads that have been found in archaeological sites from Wisconsin to Florida, from Oklahoma to North Carolina. These trade networks brought exotic materials back to Cahokia: copper from Lake Superior, shells from the Gulf Coast, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, creating a cosmopolitan material culture that reflected the city's role as the economic and spiritual center of a vast cultural sphere. Religion permeated every aspect of Cahokian life. But this was not the grim spirituality of sacrifice and suffering that characterized some ancient civilizations. Instead, Cahokian religion celebrated life, fertility, and the cyclical renewal of the natural world. The great festivals that drew thousands to the Grand Plaza combined religious ceremony with athletic competitions, artistic performances, and communal feasting that strengthened social bonds while honoring the spiritual forces that governed their world. The famous game of Chun-Ki exemplified this integration of sport, religion, and social life. Players would roll a carefully shaped stone disc across a prepared field while throwing spears or poles, trying to land their projectiles as close as possible to where the disc came to rest. This game, which archaeologists have found evidence of throughout the Mississippian world, was more than mere entertainment. It was a sacred activity that reflected cosmic principles while providing opportunities for gambling, socializing, and displays of skill that enhanced individual prestige. The astronomical knowledge of Cahokian priests and astronomers rivaled that of any ancient civilization. They constructed sophisticated solar observatories, including a circle of wooden posts called Woodhenge that functioned as a calendar for tracking seasonal changes and scheduling religious festivals. Their understanding of celestial cycles enabled them to coordinate agricultural activities across their vast territory while maintaining the ritual calendar that governed religious and social life. The rise of Cahokia around 1050 CE represents one of the most dramatic urban developments in human history. Archaeological evidence suggests that the transformation from modest village to major city happened with remarkable speed, a phenomenon scholars call the Big Bang of Cahokian development. Within a generation or two, thousands of people had moved to the site, massive construction projects had reshaped the landscape, and an entirely new form of social organization had emerged to govern this unprecedented urban experiment. The mystery of what triggered this rapid development continues to intrigue archaeologists and historians. Some point to favorable climate changes that increased agricultural productivity, others to charismatic religious leaders who inspired mass movements, and still others to innovations in social organization that enabled large-scale cooperation. Most likely, all these factors combined to create conditions that made the Cahokian experiment both possible and irresistibly attractive to people throughout the Mississippian world. The peaceful nature of early Cahokian society reflected a sophisticated understanding of social psychology and conflict resolution. Rather than ruling through fear and force, Cahokian leaders maintained their authority through the provision of prosperity, the organization of spectacular festivals, and the demonstration of spiritual power that convinced people their city was blessed by divine favor. This approach to governance created a remarkably stable and creative society that lasted for centuries. The influence of Cahokian culture extended far beyond the city itself, inspiring the construction of mound complexes and ceremonial centers throughout the Mississippian world. From Spiro in Oklahoma to Moundville in Alabama, from Etowah in Georgia to Angel Mounds in Indiana, smaller versions of Cahokian architecture and material culture appeared wherever Mississippian influence reached, creating a cultural network that unified much of eastern North America under Cahokian inspiration. The ecological wisdom of Cahokian society enabled them to sustain large populations without degrading their environment for centuries. They understood flood cycles, soil management, and sustainable hunting practices that maintained the natural abundance of their region while supporting urban populations that wouldn't be matched in North America until the 18th century. This environmental harmony reflected a worldview that saw humans as part of natural systems rather than their masters. As we begin our exploration of this lost metropolis, let your mind embrace the peaceful rhythms of ancient American life, where community celebration took precedence over individual accumulation, where spiritual wisdom guided practical decisions, and where the great river provided both highway and lifeline for a civilization that achieved greatness through cooperation rather than conquest. The story of Cahokia reminds us that sophisticated urban civilization is not the exclusive achievement of any particular culture or continent, but represents a universal human potential that has emerged independently wherever conditions have permitted. The Native American builders of this magnificent city demonstrated organizational skills, artistic vision, and social wisdom that created one of the world's great urban achievements, a peaceful metropolis that thrived for centuries in the heart of a continent that Europeans would later claim as wilderness. Feel the gentle flow of the great Mississippi carrying the hopes and dreams of countless generations. Hear the distant echoes of ceremonies that once brought joy to thousands of gathered people, and sense the profound continuity that connects the wisdom of ancient Cahokia to our continuing search for ways to live together in harmony with each other and the natural world that sustains us all. As the gentle evening mist rises from the countless rivers and streams that weave through the American heartland, let your mind drift back through centuries of slow cultural evolution to discover how the magnificent builders of Cahokia emerged from the ancient traditions of their ancestors. Tonight, we follow the peaceful transformation of woodland peoples into the sophisticated Mississippian culture, a civilization that would reshape the landscape of eastern North America through their mastery of earthwork construction and community organization. Close your eyes and feel the deep currents of cultural change flowing like the great rivers themselves, carrying forward the wisdom of countless generations who learned to live in harmony with the abundant forests, fertile floodplains, and seasonal rhythms that defined life in ancient America. Picture the vast Mississippi River Valley as it appeared 1,000 years before Cahokia's rise, when small bands of Native Americans moved through endless forests following game trails that had been worn smooth by countless generations of deer, elk, and buffalo. These were the woodland peoples, the cultural ancestors of the Mississippians, who had developed sophisticated ways of life perfectly adapted to the rich environments of eastern North America. They were not primitive wanderers, as early European observers mistakenly believed, but rather skilled hunter-gatherers who possessed detailed knowledge of plant and animal behavior, seasonal cycles, and landscape management techniques that sustained abundant wildlife populations for thousands of years. The woodland tradition, which archaeologists date from about 1000 BCE to 1000 CE, represented a remarkable flowering of Native American innovation and cultural sophistication. These peoples created some of North America's most impressive earthworks, including the mysterious Serpent Mound in Ohio, which stretches for nearly a quarter-mile across ancient hilltops in the form of a giant snake. They developed sophisticated pottery traditions, elaborate burial customs, and trade networks that connected communities from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic coast. The transition from woodland to Mississippian culture didn't happen overnight, but evolved gradually over several centuries as changing climate conditions, population growth, and cultural innovations combined to create new possibilities for human society. Around 800 CE, warmer temperatures and longer growing seasons created ideal conditions for the spread of corn agriculture from Mexico into the American Southeast and Midwest, providing the agricultural foundation that would eventually support the large urban populations of places like Cahokia. Corn, along with beans and squash, the sacred three sisters of Native American agriculture, transformed ancient American society as profoundly as the introduction of wheat agriculture had changed the ancient Near East thousands of years earlier. These crops provided reliable food surpluses that could support craftsmen, religious specialists, and political leaders who didn't need to spend all their time hunting and gathering. The stored grain enabled communities to grow larger and remain in one place year-round, setting the stage for the urban developments that would characterize Mississippian culture. The first permanent villages began appearing throughout the southeast and Midwest around 800 CE, small communities of perhaps a few dozen families who built their homes around central plazas where community activities could take place. Archaeological evidence suggests these early villages were remarkably peaceful places, with little evidence of fortifications or warfare. Instead, the emphasis seemed to be on cooperation, sharing, and the gradual development of the social institutions that would eventually enable much larger communities to function harmoniously. The distinctive Mississippian pottery tradition emerged during this transitional period, characterized by shell-tempered ceramics with sophisticated decorative techniques that reflected growing artistic skill and cultural complexity. These weren't merely utilitarian containers, but works of art that displayed symbols and designs related to Mississippian religious beliefs and social organization. The widespread distribution of similar pottery styles across vast distances suggests growing cultural unity and communication networks that connected far-flung communities through shared traditions and beliefs. Religious innovation played a crucial role in the emergence of Mississippian culture, as spiritual leaders developed new ceremonies and beliefs that helped unite larger groups of people around common purposes and shared identities. The southeastern ceremonial complex, sometimes called the Southern cult, created a sophisticated religious system that combined elements of sun worship, ancestor veneration, and nature spirituality into comprehensive worldview that guided both individual behavior and community organization. The sacred symbolism of Mississippian religion, the cross circle representing the four sacred directions, the winged serpent symbolizing the connection between earth and sky, the falcon warrior representing courage and spiritual power, appears consistently across thousands of miles of Mississippian territory, suggesting religious concepts that transcended local differences and created cultural unity across diverse communities. This shared spiritual language enabled the cooperation and coordination necessary for large-scale construction projects like the mounds that would define Mississippian civilization. The mound building tradition itself evolved gradually from earlier woodland practices, as communities began constructing increasingly elaborate earthworks for religious ceremonies, elite burials, and community gatherings. The earliest Mississippian mounds were relatively modest structures, but they established the engineering knowledge and organizational systems that would eventually enable the construction of massive monuments like Monk's Mound at Cahokia. The social organization of early Mississippian communities reflected a careful balance between individual freedom and community cooperation that enabled these societies to function effectively without the rigid hierarchies that characterized many ancient civilizations. Leaders earned their positions through demonstrated wisdom, generosity, and spiritual power rather than inherited authority or military conquest. This consensual approach to governance created remarkably stable communities that could undertake long-term projects while maintaining social harmony. Trade networks that had connected woodland communities for centuries expanded and intensified during the Mississippian period, as improved agricultural productivity created surpluses that could be exchanged for exotic materials and finished goods from distant regions. Copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, and chert from specialized quarries all flowed through these exchange systems, enabling local craftsmen to create sophisticated artwork and ceremonial objects that reflected the cosmopolitan nature of Mississippian culture. The role of women in Mississippian society appears to have been particularly important, as they controlled agricultural production, maintained household economies, and often served as spiritual leaders and keepers of cultural knowledge. The prominence of feminine imagery in Mississippian art and the importance of corn agriculture. Traditionally, women's work in most Native American societies suggests that feminine wisdom and authority were highly valued and institutionally recognized. Environmental management techniques developed by Mississippian communities demonstrated sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships and sustainable resource use. They created forest clearings through controlled burning that increased wildlife populations and encouraged useful plants, managed wetlands to maximize waterfowl productivity, and developed agricultural systems that maintained soil fertility while supporting growing populations. These practices reflected worldviews that emphasized human responsibility for maintaining natural abundance rather than simply exploiting available resources. The seasonal round of Mississippian life followed ancient patterns that synchronized human activities with natural cycles in ways that created both practical efficiency and spiritual meaning. Spring planting ceremonies combined agricultural work with religious observances that honored the forces of renewal and growth. Summer festivals celebrated the abundance of the natural world while strengthening social bonds through shared feasting and ceremonial activities. Autumn harvest celebrations gave thanks for the year's bounty while preparing communities for winter through food storage and craft production. Winter became a time for storytelling, spiritual instruction, and the creation of artwork that preserved cultural knowledge and artistic traditions. The emergence of specialized craft production marked another important development in early Mississippian society, as skilled artisans developed techniques for creating pottery, textiles, stone tools, and ceremonial objects that surpassed anything produced in earlier periods. These craftsmen weren't isolated specialists but community members whose skills contributed to both practical needs and cultural expression, creating objects that were both functional and beautiful. Regional variation within the broader Mississippian cultural tradition reflected local adaptations to different environmental conditions and cultural influences while maintaining overall cultural unity. Communities along major rivers developed sophisticated maritime technologies and trading specializations, while those in mountainous regions focused on stone tool production and mineral extraction. Prairie communities developed unique agricultural techniques adapted to grassland environments, while those in heavily forested areas specialized in woodland management and hunting technologies. The gradual accumulation of population in favorable locations set the stage for the urban developments that would characterize the peak of Mississippian civilization. River confluences like the American Bottom, where the Missouri, Mississippi, and Illinois rivers converged, attracted growing numbers of people who were drawn by the exceptional agricultural potential, strategic location for trade, and spiritual significance of these landscape features. The peaceful nature of early Mississippian expansion reflected cultural values that emphasized cooperation and mutual benefit rather than conquest and domination. When Mississippian influences appeared in new regions, they typically resulted from voluntary adoption of successful innovations rather than military conquest or cultural suppression. This approach created a remarkably stable and creative cultural sphere that would eventually encompass much of eastern North America as we observe this gradual cultural evolution unfolding across the centuries. We see how human societies can develop increasing sophistication and complexity while maintaining harmony with natural environments and peaceful relationships among communities. The Mississippian achievement represented not just technological and organizational progress, but wisdom about how to create social institutions that enhanced human potential while preserving the ecological foundations that sustained life itself. The legacy of these early Mississippian innovations, their agricultural techniques, artistic traditions, religious insights, and social institutions, would provide the foundation for all later developments in their cultural sphere, including the magnificent urban achievement we call Cahokia. Their patient work over many generations created the knowledge, skills, and cultural unity that made possible one of North America's greatest civilizational achievements. As the gentle morning mist rises from the confluence of three great rivers, we witness tonight one of the most remarkable transformations in human history, the moment when a modest riverside settlement exploded into North America's greatest pre-Columbian city in the span of just 50 years. Let your mind drift back to around 1050 CE, when what archaeologists call the Big Bang of Cahokian development began reshaping the American bottom landscape through an unprecedented burst of urban planning and monumental construction. Close your eyes and imagine the quiet determination of thousands of people working together with nothing but their hands, woven baskets, and shared vision to move 55 million cubic feet of earth and create a metropolis that would dwarf European cities for centuries to come. Picture yourself floating above the American bottom as this extraordinary transformation begins to unfold. The year is 1050 CE, and the scattered woodland villages that have dotted this fertile landscape for generations are suddenly buzzing with activity unlike anything North America has ever seen. Families are arriving daily from hundreds of miles away, some from the Ohio River Valley, others from the lower Mississippi region, still others from the Great Lakes and the southeastern woodlands. They come not as conquerors but as pilgrims, drawn by word of something unprecedented happening at the confluence of the great rivers. The master planners of Cahokia possessed a sophisticated understanding of urban design that wouldn't be matched in North America until the colonial period. Working with an ordered vision that encompassed the entire landscape, they laid out their city in a precise diamond pattern oriented to the four cardinal directions, with the main east-west and north-south axes intersecting near the center of what would become Monk's Mound. This wasn't random growth but deliberate design, a conscious decision to create urban space that reflected their understanding of cosmic order and sacred geography. The Grand Plaza represents perhaps the most impressive feat of landscape engineering in pre-Columbian North America. What appears today as a natural flat expanse was actually an extraordinary construction project that required the complete transformation of the original terrain. The area that would become the plaza had been rolling ridge and swale topography, natural undulations left by ancient river channels and flood cycles. The Cahokian planners decided this wouldn't do for their vision of urban grandeur, so they embarked on one of the continent's first major landscape modification projects. Imagine the patient work required to level and fill 50 acres of uneven ground using only human labor and woven baskets. Teams of workers carefully removed soil from the ridges and carried it to fill the swales, creating a perfectly flat ceremonial space that measured over 1,600 feet in length by over 900 feet in width. This was engineering on a scale that required not just technical knowledge but also the social organization to coordinate the labor of thousands of people working toward a common goal over many years. The construction of Monk's Mound itself represents one of the most ambitious architectural projects ever undertaken in ancient North America. Rising in 4 distinct terraces to a height of 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain, this massive earthen pyramid covers 14 acres at its base, larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt. The builders moved an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth to create this monument, all of it carried basket by basket from borrow pits scattered around the construction site. Watch as work crews organize themselves into efficient teams for the monumental task ahead. Groups of diggers work the borrow pits, carefully extracting soil and loading it into large woven baskets. Other teams carry these heavy loads along designated pathways to the growing mound, where they dump their burdens and return for another load. Supervisors coordinate the work, ensuring that each layer is properly compacted and that the mound rises according to the planned design. The rhythm is steady and peaceful, no shouting overseers or forced labor, but rather the quiet satisfaction of community members working together to create something magnificent. The residential neighborhoods that surrounded the ceremonial core demonstrate equally sophisticated planning principles. Rather than allowing random settlement patterns, Cahokian planners organized housing into carefully designed clusters around smaller plazas and mounds. These neighborhoods possessed standardized building types including family homes, steam baths, council houses, and temples, suggesting a comprehensive approach to urban design that considered both practical needs and social organization. The typical Cahokian house represented a remarkable standardization of domestic architecture. Built using pole and thatch construction with rectangular footprints, these homes featured walls made from closely spaced posts or sometimes continuous wall trenches filled with smaller saplings. The roofs were thatched with prairie grasses, creating buildings that were both weatherproof and well insulated against the variable climate of the Mississippi Valley. Despite their standardized construction, these homes could be customized with decorative elements and interior arrangements that reflected family preferences and social status. The city's water management system demonstrates sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering principles. Cahokian planners had to deal with the periodic flooding that characterized life in the Mississippi bottomlands, so they developed drainage systems that channeled excess water away from residential areas while ensuring adequate supplies for daily use. They dug channels and constructed earthworks that directed floodwaters into designated areas where they could recede harmlessly while leaving behind fertile silt for agricultural use. The famous palisade that eventually surrounded the central ceremonial district represents a later phase of Cahokian development, when growing populations and perhaps external pressures made defensive preparations seem necessary. This massive wooden stockade stretched for 2 miles around the city center, equipped with protective bastions that showed it was designed primarily for defense. The palisade was rebuilt several times, suggesting that maintaining these fortifications was an ongoing community priority that required constant attention and resources. The Rattlesnake Causeway represents one of Cahokia's most mysterious construction projects, an elevated embankment about 18 meters wide and roughly 800 meters long that connected the Grand Plaza to the mortuary complex centered on Rattlesnake Mound. This feature required moving thousands of cubic feet of earth to create a raised roadway that traversed the low, swampy area south of the plaza. The causeway's precise alignment, 5 degrees east of north, suggests astronomical significance related to lunar observations and perhaps the builder's agricultural calendar. The coordination required for these massive construction projects reveals sophisticated social organization and planning capabilities. Moving 55 million cubic feet of earth by hand required not just willing workers but also systems for organizing labor, providing food and water for work crews, manufacturing and maintaining the thousands of baskets needed for earth transport, and coordinating the various specialized tasks that such projects demanded. This level of organization suggests leadership that could inspire voluntary cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The speed of Cahokian urban development amazes archaeologists who study the site today. The major construction projects, Monk's Mound, the Grand Plaza, the residential neighborhoods, and most of the smaller mounds, were all completed within approximately 50 years. This represents a rate of urban development that wouldn't be matched in North America until the modern era, accomplished entirely with human muscle power and hand tools made from stone, wood, and bone. The astronomical alignment of Cahokian architecture reveals the builders' sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles and their integration into urban planning. The Woodhenge circles, arrangements of tall wooden posts that functioned as solar calendars, were positioned to provide precise observations of seasonal changes that were crucial for agricultural timing and religious festivals. These observatories required mathematical knowledge and careful construction to achieve the accuracy needed for practical use. The various types of mounds scattered throughout Cahokia served different functions within the urban landscape. Platform mounds provided elevated foundations for temples and elite residences. Conical mounds marked important burial sites or served specific ceremonial purposes, and ridgetop mounds created elevated spaces for activities that required visibility across the surrounding landscape. Each type required different construction techniques and served distinct roles in the city's social and religious organization. The standardization of pottery and architectural styles throughout Cahokian territory suggests centralized planning that extended far beyond the urban core. Villages throughout the American Bottom region adopted similar building techniques, ceramic traditions, and settlement patterns, indicating that Cahokian influence spread through voluntary adoption of successful innovations rather than military conquest. This cultural uniformity enabled the coordination necessary for large-scale construction projects and regional economic integration. The logistics of feeding the construction workforce required careful planning and resource management. Archaeological evidence suggests that agricultural production intensified throughout the region to support the growing urban population, with farming communities specializing in surplus production, while urban workshops focused on craft goods and ceremonial objects. This economic specialization enabled the sustained effort necessary for major construction projects while maintaining the high quality of life that attracted continued immigration to the city. The integration of natural and constructed elements in Cahokian urban design reflects sophisticated understanding of landscape architecture principles. Rather than simply imposing geometric patterns on the terrain, the planners worked with natural features like rivers, wetlands, and elevation changes to create urban spaces that enhanced rather than dominated the existing environment. This approach created a city that felt organic despite its careful planning, a place where human constructions complemented rather than competed with natural beauty. The preservation of green spaces within the urban core suggests that Cahokian planners understood the importance of maintaining connections to the natural world even within dense settlements. Trees, gardens, and wetland areas were integrated into residential neighborhoods, providing resources for daily use while creating pleasant environments for community life. This attention to environmental quality contributed to the city's attractiveness for residents and visitors alike. As we observe this remarkable period of urban construction, we witness human cooperation and vision on a scale that challenges modern assumptions about ancient capabilities. The builders of Cahokia demonstrated that sophisticated urban planning, monumental architecture, and complex social organization were not unique achievements of old-world civilizations but represented universal human potentials that emerged wherever conditions permitted their expression. The peaceful nature of this construction effort, accomplished without the massive slave labor that characterized many ancient building projects, reflects social values that emphasized voluntary cooperation and shared benefit rather than coercion and exploitation. The workers who built Cahokia were not slaves but community members invested in creating something magnificent for themselves and their descendants. As the gentle dawn light filters through the morning mist that rises from the great rivers, we step into the daily rhythm of life in ancient Cahokia, where 20,000 souls lived and worked in harmony within North America's greatest pre-Columbian city. Tonight, let your mind drift into the neighborhoods and workshops, the fields and plazas, where ordinary Cahokians created lives of remarkable richness and community connection. Close your eyes and imagine yourself awakening in a Cahokian household as the first light of day illuminates the carefully planned streets of this magnificent metropolis, where every day brought opportunities for meaningful work, social connection, and participation in a civilization that valued cooperation above competition. Picture yourself in a typical Cahokian home as the family begins their daily routine in the soft light of early morning. These single-room rectangular structures, built with pole and thatch construction, housed families of about 5 people each, providing enough space for sleeping, storing possessions and dried foods, and maintaining the small fires that heated these cozy dwellings during cool weather. The walls, made from closely spaced posts or continuous wall trenches filled with smaller saplings and covered with thatch, created homes that were both weatherproof and well insulated against the variable climate of the Mississippi Valley. The day begins with the women and girls of the household preparing for their primary responsibility, tending the agricultural fields that sustained this great city. Women shaped not only the cuisine but the entire agricultural culture of ancient Cahokia, and their critical knowledge of domesticated crops and wild food plants earned them essential status within the community. As the morning progresses, they gather their stone hoes and woven baskets, preparing to tend the fields of corn, beans, and squash that stretch across the fertile bottomland surrounding the urban core. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, formed the foundation of Cahokian agriculture, but their diet was remarkably diverse, especially in the city's early period. In addition to these staple crops, Cahokians cultivated sunflowers, goosefoot, and sumpweed from the eastern agricultural complex, creating a varied agricultural system that provided both nutritional security and culinary variety. The men and boys also worked in the fields, though they specialized more in hunting and fishing expeditions that took them to the lakes and forests within 2 or 3 days' walk of the city. Watch as Cahokian hunters set out for their expeditions into the rich wetlands and forests that surrounded their city. They fished in the numerous lakes and streams, capturing varieties of freshwater fish that provided protein for the urban population. Their hunting focused on birds, deer, and occasionally animals like beavers and turtles, using sophisticated techniques that included controlled burns to manage wildlife populations and create favorable hunting conditions. The daily meals of Cahokian families reflected the abundance of their environment and the skill of their food preparation techniques. While residents of outlying areas relied heavily on corn for subsistence, those living in Cahokia's city center enjoyed more diverse diets that included significant amounts of meat and wild foods. Archaeological evidence suggests that higher social status correlated with more varied diets, particularly increased consumption of deer protein, though even common families enjoyed access to a wide range of foods. The preparation of corn involved sophisticated processing techniques that made this crucial crop more nutritious and digestible. Early Cahokians used nixtamalization, a process of treating corn with alkali, to improve its nutritional value, though this practice was discontinued around 1200 CE for reasons that remain unclear. The grinding of corn, done primarily by women using stone tools, was often a social activity where extended families and friends gathered around outdoor work areas, sharing stories and maintaining community bonds while completing necessary daily tasks. Most of daily life unfolded outdoors, as the small interior spaces of Cahokian homes served primarily for sleeping and storage. Almost all socializing, gaming, and work happened in the open air, whether in family courtyards, neighborhood plazas, or specialized work areas throughout the city. This outdoor lifestyle fostered constant social interaction and community connection, creating the bonds that held this large urban population together despite its diverse origins and social hierarchies. The craft specialization that characterized Cahokian society meant that many residents spent their days engaged in skilled work that contributed both practical goods and artistic beauty to their community. Potters worked at their wheels, creating both utilitarian vessels for daily use and elaborate ceremonial pieces decorated with the sophisticated designs that made Cahokian pottery famous throughout the Mississippian world. Flint knapping specialists shaped stone tools with remarkable precision, while bead makers crafted the ornaments that played important roles in personal decoration and trade relationships. The rhythm of work followed natural cycles and social patterns that integrated individual productivity with community needs. Evening meals typically found extended families and friends gathered together around outdoor cooking fires, mending nets, grinding corn, working wood, resharpening stone tool blades, and sharing the stories that preserved cultural knowledge and strengthened social bonds. These peaceful gatherings often included preparation for upcoming festivals, as community members created the costumes, decorations, and ritual objects that made Cahokian celebrations so spectacular. The famous game of chun-kee represented one of the most popular recreational activities in Cahokian society, combining athletic skill with social interaction and spiritual significance. Players would roll a carefully shaped stone disc across a prepared field while throwing spears or poles, trying to land their projectiles as close as possible to where the disc came to rest. This game, which spread throughout the Mississippian world, was more than mere entertainment. It provided opportunities for gambling, socializing, and displays of skill that enhanced individual prestige while building community connections. The religious calendar governed much of daily life, as Cahokians organized their activities around the seasonal festivals that brought the community together for celebration, worship, and social reinforcement. The Woodhenge solar calendar helped time these major festivals, which coincided with important agricultural events like planting and harvest seasons. These gatherings were remarkable social events that sometimes attracted thousands of participants and lasted for days, featuring elaborate feasting, ceremonial performances, and the kind of massive social networking that maintained cultural unity across the vast Mississippian sphere. Preparation for festivals occupied much of the community's creative energy, as people crafted elaborate costumes featuring shell beads, feathers, and fine leather that caught sunlight during ceremonial performances. Cahokians loved a palette of red, white, and black, and styled their hair into elaborate buns, mohawks, and plumes that created striking visual effects during community gatherings. Some individuals adorned their bodies and faces with tattoos, adding another layer of artistic expression to their personal appearance. The consumption of caffeinated drinks made from Yorpen holly added an exotic element to Cahokian celebrations. Since Yorpen's native range was hundreds of miles from Cahokia, obtaining this stimulating beverage required significant effort and trade relationships, yet its presence in ceremonial contexts demonstrates the lengths to which Cahokians would go to enhance their social gatherings. These caffeinated drinks helped keep elaborate festivals going for days, contributing to the legendary status of Cahokian celebrations throughout the ancient Mississippian world. The social hierarchies that characterized Cahokian society were evident in daily life, though they appear to have been relatively fluid and based more on achievement and spiritual authority than rigid hereditary divisions. Important differences in social status can be seen in material possessions, dietary variety, and access to luxury goods, Yet the overall impression is of a society that provided opportunities for advancement and meaningful participation for all community members. The integration of spiritual beliefs into daily activities meant that Cahokians understood their work, recreation, and social interactions as part of a larger cosmic order that connected human communities to natural forces and ancestral wisdom. This worldview created meaning and purpose in ordinary activities while fostering the cooperation and mutual respect that enabled such a large and diverse population to live together harmoniously. The care and education of children involved the entire community, as young Cahokians learned essential skills through observation and gradual participation in adult activities. Girls learned agricultural techniques, food processing, pottery making, and textile production from their mothers and other women, while boys acquired hunting, fishing, and craft skills from their fathers and male community members. This integrated approach to education ensured that cultural knowledge was preserved and transmitted while preparing young people for productive roles in their complex society. The peaceful nature of most daily interactions reflects the cultural values that enabled Cahokia to function as a major urban center without the massive military establishments that characterized many ancient cities. While social hierarchies existed and the later construction of defensive palisades suggests growing security concerns, the overall pattern of daily life emphasizes cooperation, shared celebration, and mutual support rather than competition and conflict. Market activities and trade relationships connected Cahokian daily life to the broader Mississippian world, as local products were exchanged for exotic materials and finished goods from distant regions. The presence of copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, and other non-local materials in ordinary household contexts demonstrates that even common families participated in the trade networks that made Cahokia a cosmopolitan center of ancient American civilization. The seasonal round of activities created natural rhythms that governed daily life throughout the year. Spring brought intensive agricultural work as fields were prepared and crops planted according to the solar calendar maintained by Cahokian astronomers. Summer involved crop cultivation, gathering of wild foods, and preparation for the harvest festivals that marked the agricultural year's most important celebrations. Autumn focused on harvesting, food processing, and storage activities that prepared the community for winter months devoted to craft production, storytelling, and the creation of objects needed for the following year's ceremonies. As we observe this daily life unfolding across ancient Cahokia, we see a remarkable achievement in human social organization. A large, diverse urban population that created meaningful, productive, and celebratory lives within a framework that valued both individual achievement and community cooperation. The integration of work and worship, the balance between personal freedom and social responsibility, and the emphasis on celebration and mutual support created a quality of life that enabled this great city to flourish for centuries in the heart of ancient America. As the gentle evening light casts long shadows across the American bottom, we turn our attention tonight to the most magnificent achievement of ancient Cahokia, the colossal earthen pyramid that rises like a dream from the fertile floodplains, standing as North America's first skyscraper and one of the largest monuments ever built by human hands. Let your mind drift upward with the patient workers who carried basket after basket of earth to create Monk's Mound, a structure so massive that it covers 14 acres at its base and rises 10 stories into the prairie sky. Close your eyes and feel the quiet determination of thousands of people working together across generations to build something that would touch the heavens while honoring the earth that sustained their remarkable civilization. Picture yourself standing at the base of Monk's Mound on a misty morning around 1100 CE, when this magnificent structure was nearing completion after decades of careful construction. Rising before you in 4 distinct terraces, this earthen pyramid stretches upward for 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain, taller than a 10-story building and visible for miles across the flat Mississippi Valley. The sheer scale defies comprehension when you realize that every cubic foot of this monument was moved by human hands, carried in woven baskets from carefully selected borrow pits scattered around the construction site. The statistics of Monk's Mound stagger the imagination even today. The structure contains approximately 22 million cubic feet of earth, enough soil to fill a modern football stadium from ground level to the top of the upper deck. At its base, the mound measures roughly 1,000 feet from north to south and 800 feet from east to west, covering 14 acres of ground with its massive footprint. To put this in perspective, the base of Monk's Mound is larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt, making it one of the largest monuments by volume ever constructed anywhere in the world. Watch as the construction crews organize their work with remarkable efficiency and coordination. The building process required careful planning and sophisticated understanding of engineering principles that ensured the massive structure would remain stable despite its enormous weight and height. The builders selected specific types of clay and soil from different locations around Cahokia, understanding that certain materials would compact better and provide greater stability for different parts of the construction. The borrow pits from which earth was excavated tell their own story of careful resource management and environmental planning. Rather than simply digging random holes, the Cahokian engineers created their borrow areas in locations that would later become useful landscape features. Some became ponds that provided water for residential areas. Others were positioned to improve drainage around the urban core, and still others created depressions that could collect rainwater for agricultural use during dry periods. The construction process itself followed sophisticated techniques that ensured the mound's long-term stability. Rather than simply piling earth in one enormous heap, the builders created the monument in distinct stages, allowing each phase to settle and compact before adding the next layer. Archaeological excavation has revealed that Monk's Mound was built in at least 14 separate construction episodes, each involving millions of cubic feet of earth moved and carefully positioned according to an overall plan that was maintained across generations of workers. Each layer of construction involved different types of fill material carefully selected for specific structural purposes. The core of the mound consists primarily of clay-rich soils that were chosen for their ability to compact tightly and resist erosion. The outer surfaces used sandier materials that would drain well and prevent water from saturating the structure during heavy rains or spring floods. This understanding of soil mechanics enabled the builders to create a monument that has survived for nearly 1,000 years despite the challenging climate of the Mississippi Valley. The workforce required for this monumental construction project represented one of the largest coordinated labor efforts in pre-Columbian North America. Archaeologists estimate that at the peak of construction, hundreds of workers were engaged simultaneously in the various activities required: digging soil from borrow pits, carrying filled baskets to the construction site, spreading and compacting each load, and managing the complex logistics of moving millions of cubic feet of earth using only human muscle power and simple hand tools. The social organization necessary to coordinate such massive construction efforts reveals the sophisticated leadership and administrative capabilities of Cahokian society. This wasn't forced labor imposed by tyrannical rulers, but rather a community effort that required willing cooperation from people who understood themselves as participating in something sacred and magnificent. The workers included families who had traveled to Cahokia from hundreds of miles away, drawn by the spiritual significance and economic opportunities that the great construction projects provided. The famous baskets used to carry earth represented remarkable achievements in textile technology and mass production. These containers, woven from local plant materials, had to be strong enough to carry heavy loads of wet clay yet light enough for workers to handle efficiently throughout long days of construction work. The standardized size and construction of these baskets suggests organized production systems that could manufacture thousands of identical containers to equip the construction workforce. The four terraces that give Monk's Mound its distinctive stepped profile weren't merely decorative elements but served important structural and functional purposes. Each terrace provided a stable platform that distributed the enormous weight of the upper levels while creating level areas that could be used for buildings, ceremonies, and administrative activities. The terracing also reduced wind loads and provided more surface area for the elaborate structures that crown the monument. Archaeological investigation has revealed evidence of sophisticated buildings that once stood atop Monk's Mound, including what appears to have been a large temple or residence that measured roughly 100 feet long and 50 feet wide. This massive structure, supported by hundreds of wooden posts, would have dominated the Cahokian skyline and provided commanding views across the entire urban region. The building's position at the summit of North America's largest pyramid emphasized its importance while creating dramatic visual effects that reinforced the spiritual and political authority of those who lived and worked there. The alignment of Monk's Mound reflects the astronomical knowledge that guided much of Cahokian architecture and urban planning. The structure is oriented precisely to the cardinal directions, with its long axis running north-south and its shorter dimension extending east-west. This careful alignment connected the monument to the cosmic order that governed Cahokian religious beliefs while ensuring that the summit buildings would receive optimal lighting throughout the day and seasons. The construction techniques used for Monk's Mound demonstrate sophisticated understanding of engineering principles that wouldn't be formally codified until much later periods. The builders understood concepts like load distribution, drainage management, and soil compaction that enabled them to create a structure of unprecedented size that has remained stable for nearly a millennium. Modern engineers who study the mound express amazement at the advanced techniques that were employed using only pre-industrial materials and methods. The logistics of feeding and housing the construction workforce required careful planning and resource management that demonstrates the administrative sophistication of Cahokian society. The workers needed approximately 2,000 calories per day each, requiring massive quantities of corn, meat, and other foods that had to be produced, processed, stored, and distributed throughout the construction period. This subsistence support system involved agricultural communities throughout the American Bottom region and demonstrates the economic integration that made large-scale construction projects possible. The symbolic significance of Monk's Mound extended far beyond its practical functions as a platform for important buildings. The structure served as a cosmic mountain that connected the earthly realm of daily life to the spiritual dimensions inhabited by ancestors, spirits, and deities. Its massive presence in the landscape proclaimed Cahokia's importance to visitors from across the continent while providing a focal point for religious ceremonies and community celebrations that drew participants from throughout the Mississippian world. The acoustic properties of Monk's Mound created dramatic effects during ceremonial events, as speakers standing on the summit could be heard clearly by thousands of people gathered in the grand plaza below. The monument's size and shape naturally amplified human voices while reducing distracting echoes, making it an ideal platform for the public addresses and religious proclamations that were central to Cahokian political and spiritual life. The view from the summit of Monk's Mound provided strategic advantages for monitoring river traffic, weather patterns, and activities throughout the urban region. Leaders standing atop the monument could observe the approach of trading expeditions, track seasonal changes that affected agricultural timing, and maintain visual communication with other mound centers throughout the American Bottom. This elevated perspective reinforced the practical authority of Cahokian leaders while creating opportunities for the astronomical observations that guided religious and agricultural calendars. Recent archaeological techniques have revealed new details about the construction and use of Monk's Mound that weren't apparent to earlier researchers. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies have identified internal features, construction sequences, and structural elements that help clarify how this massive monument was built and how it functioned within Cahokian society. These discoveries continue to deepen our appreciation for the engineering sophistication and social organization that made such monumental construction possible. The environmental impact of Monk's Mound construction demonstrates the careful resource management that characterized Cahokian society during its peak period. The massive amount of earth required for the project was extracted in ways that enhanced rather than degraded the surrounding landscape, creating water features and improved drainage that supported both urban development and agricultural productivity. This approach reflects environmental wisdom that understood large-scale construction as an opportunity to improve rather than damage natural systems. The preservation of Monk's Mound represents ongoing challenges and opportunities for understanding ancient American achievements. Natural processes of erosion, vegetation growth, and settling continue to modify the structure, while modern conservation efforts work to stabilize and protect this irreplaceable monument. The careful balance between preservation and research ensures that future generations will be able to study and appreciate this remarkable achievement of ancient engineering and community cooperation. As we contemplate this magnificent monument rising peacefully from the prairie landscape, we witness one of humanity's most remarkable achievements in cooperative construction and environmental harmony. The thousands of people who contributed their labor to building Monk's Mound created something that transcended individual ambition or temporary political goals. They built a lasting symbol of what human communities can achieve when they work together toward shared visions of beauty, meaning, and spiritual connection. The quiet dignity of Monk's Mound continues to inspire visitors nearly 1,000 years after its completion, reminding us that the greatest human achievements often emerge not from individual genius or competitive struggle, but from the patient cooperation of communities united around common purposes and shared dreams of creating something magnificent that will endure long after the builders themselves have returned to the earth that sustained their remarkable civilization. As the gentle stars begin to appear in the darkening prairie sky above ancient Cahokia, we turn our attention tonight to one of the most remarkable achievements of Native American science, the sophisticated astronomical observations that guided this great civilization through the cycles of seasons, ceremonies, and agricultural abundance. Let your mind drift into the peaceful world of Cahokian astronomers, who built elegant wooden observatories and developed precise calendars without telescopes or written mathematics, using only patient observation and profound understanding of celestial rhythms. Close your eyes and feel the quiet wisdom of ancient stargazers who found in the heavens the knowledge needed to sustain their earthbound community in harmony with the eternal cycles that governed all life on Earth. Picture yourself standing within the sacred circle of wooden posts that archaeologists call Woodhenge, one of several solar observatories that the Cahokians constructed on the terraces west of Monk's Mound. The year is 1100 CE, and you are witnessing the summer solstice sunrise as observed by the master astronomers of ancient America's greatest city. Around you, tall red cedar posts rise from the earth in a perfect circle, their positions calculated with mathematical precision to mark the key moments of the solar year, the solstices and equinoxes that determined when to plant crops, when to harvest, and when to celebrate the great festivals that unified the Mississippian world. The construction of Woodhenge required knowledge and skills that modern astronomers recognize as genuinely scientific, though achieved through methods very different from contemporary techniques. The Cahokian astronomers worked without metal instruments, written numbers, or abstract mathematical formulas, yet they created observational tools that were accurate to within a day or two across the entire solar year. This precision enabled them to predict seasonal changes, coordinate agricultural activities across vast territories, and schedule religious ceremonies that required participants to travel hundreds of miles to reach Cahokia at precisely the right moments. Watch as the ancient astronomers begin their observations in the pre-dawn darkness, taking their positions at the center of the wooden circle while assistants station themselves at specific posts around the perimeter. The eastern horizon shows the first pale glow of approaching sunrise, and the observers wait with patient concentration for the moment when the sun's disk will appear precisely aligned with one of the massive posts that mark this most important day of the year. This is science at its most elemental: direct observation, careful measurement, and patient recording of natural phenomena that repeat with predictable precision year after year. The wooden posts themselves represent remarkable achievements in both astronomy and engineering. Each post was carefully selected from red cedar trees, shaped to uniform dimensions, and positioned according to precise surveying techniques that ensured perfect alignment with specific celestial events. The posts were approximately 20 feet tall and 2 feet in diameter, massive timbers that required considerable effort to transport, position, and erect. The Cahokians built at least 5 different Woodhenge circles over time, with each reconstruction involving slight adjustments that reflected increasingly sophisticated understanding of astronomical relationships. The mathematical principles underlying Woodhenge construction demonstrate knowledge that wouldn't be formally developed in European science for several centuries. The Cahokian astronomers understood concepts of angular measurement, circular geometry, and precise surveying that enabled them to create observatories with the accuracy needed for practical use. They could calculate the positions needed for specific posts, maintain straight sight lines across long distances, and create circles with the geometric perfection necessary for reliable astronomical observations. The solar calendar that emerged from these observations integrated astronomical knowledge with the practical needs of agricultural and ceremonial life. The Cahokian year began with the winter solstice, when the sun reached its southernmost position and began its journey back toward summer. This starting point made practical sense for an agricultural people, as it marked the turning point when days began growing longer and the approach of the planting season could be anticipated with confidence. The 4 major turning points of the solar year, the winter and summer solstices and the spring and autumn equinoxes, were marked by specific ceremonies and community gatherings that brought people together from across the Mississippian world. These festivals required months of preparation and coordination, making accurate calendar predictions essential for successful community life. The astronomical observations provided the precise timing that enabled thousands of people to gather simultaneously for celebrations that strengthened cultural bonds while honoring the cosmic forces that governed earthly life. The integration of lunar observations with solar tracking created even more sophisticated calendrical systems that could predict eclipses, track longer celestial cycles, and coordinate complex ceremonial sequences. The Cahokian astronomers understood that the moon's phases followed patterns that repeated in predictable cycles, enabling them to create calendars that combined solar and lunar elements in ways that served both practical and spiritual purposes. The famous red cedar post at Woodhenge 3, positioned to mark sunrise at the winter solstice as viewed from the center of the circle, demonstrates the precision that Cahokian astronomy achieved. This post alignment was accurate to within 1 degree of arc, a level of precision that required sophisticated surveying techniques and deep understanding of celestial mechanics. Modern archaeoastronomers who study these alignments express amazement at the accuracy achieved using only wooden posts and careful observation. The relationship between astronomical observations and agricultural timing reveals the practical applications that motivated Cahokian scientific development. The spring equinox marked the time when soil temperatures and day-length conditions became favorable for planting corn, while the summer solstice indicated the period when crops needed maximum attention and water management. The autumn equinox signaled harvest time, and the winter solstice marked the beginning of the season when stored foods would sustain the community until the next growing season began. The training required to become a skilled astronomer priest in Cahokian society involved decades of careful observation and memorization of complex celestial patterns. These specialists needed to learn not just the positions of individual stars and constellations, but the subtle changes in their rising and setting times throughout the year, the varying paths of the moon across different seasons, and the long-term cycles that governed eclipses and other dramatic celestial events. The spiritual dimensions of Cahokian astronomy integrated scientific observation with religious understanding in ways that created comprehensive worldviews connecting earthly life with cosmic order. The movements of sun, moon, and stars weren't merely mechanical phenomena but expressions of spiritual forces that required human response through ceremony, respect, and careful attention to natural rhythms. This integration of science and spirituality created knowledge systems that served both practical and meaningful purposes in daily life. The influence of Cahokian astronomical knowledge spread throughout the Mississippian world, as the accurate calendars and ceremonial timing developed at the great city were adopted by communities across eastern North America. The coordinated festivals and trading expeditions that connected far-flung settlements required astronomical knowledge that could ensure accurate timing across vast distances and diverse local conditions. The construction and reconstruction of multiple Woodhenge circles over time demonstrates the experimental nature of Cahokian astronomy, as successive generations of astronomers refined their techniques and improved their understanding of celestial relationships. Each new observatory incorporated lessons learned from previous observations while addressing changing needs and growing sophistication in astronomical understanding. The acoustic properties of Woodhenge circles created opportunities for combining astronomical observations with community education and ceremonial activities. The circular arrangement of posts created natural amphitheaters where astronomical knowledge could be shared through storytelling, ritual performance, and educational ceremonies that connected scientific understanding with cultural transmission and spiritual meaning. The preservation of astronomical knowledge through oral traditions enabled Cahokian science to continue developing across generations without written records. Master astronomers trained apprentices through direct observation, practical experience, and memorization techniques that ensured essential knowledge would survive even if individual observers were lost through accident or illness. This oral transmission system created remarkable continuity in astronomical understanding across centuries of cultural development. The relationship between Cahokian astronomy and the broader landscape reveals sophisticated understanding of environmental factors that affected celestial observations. The astronomers selected locations for their observatories that provided clear views of crucial horizons while minimizing interference from atmospheric conditions, local weather patterns, and human activities that could disrupt accurate observations. The tools used by Cahokian astronomers were elegantly simple yet remarkably effective for their intended purposes. Beyond the wooden posts of Woodhenge, the astronomers used shadow-casting devices, water level indicators, and carefully positioned markers that enabled precise measurements using only materials available in their natural environment. These instruments demonstrate the ingenuity that enabled sophisticated science to develop without the metal tools and manufactured materials that characterized astronomy in other ancient civilizations. The economic support required for astronomical activities demonstrates the value that Cahokian society placed on scientific knowledge and long-term planning. The astronomers were specialists who devoted their full attention to celestial observations, requiring community support for their subsistence while they developed and maintained the calendrical knowledge that served everyone's practical needs. This support system enabled the sustained observations necessary for accurate astronomy while ensuring that essential knowledge would be preserved and transmitted across generations. The international character of Cahokian astronomy connected their observations with similar activities throughout the ancient Americas, as astronomical knowledge was exchanged through trade relationships, diplomatic contacts, and religious connections that linked Cahokia with other centers of learning from Mexico to the Great Lakes region. This networking enabled cross-checking of observations and sharing of techniques that improved astronomical accuracy while creating common calendrical systems that facilitated long-distance communication and coordination. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new details about Cahokian astronomical achievements, as computer modeling of ancient sky conditions enables researchers to test hypotheses about specific alignments and observational techniques. These investigations confirm that Cahokian astronomers achieved remarkable precision using methods that demonstrate genuine understanding of mathematical and observational principles that form the foundation of all scientific astronomy. The legacy of Cahokian astronomy influenced Native American scientific traditions for centuries after the great city's decline. As the knowledge and techniques developed there spread through cultural exchange and migration to influence astronomical practices. Throughout eastern North America, many historical Native American communities maintained astronomical traditions that can be traced to innovations first developed in the Mississippian centers that Cahokia inspired and influenced. As we contemplate these ancient achievements in astronomical science, we witness human curiosity and intelligence applied to understanding the fundamental patterns that govern our relationship with the cosmos. The patient observations and careful reasoning of Cahokian astronomers created knowledge that was both scientifically accurate and culturally meaningful, demonstrating that the search for understanding transcends any particular technological level or cultural context. As the gentle evening mist rises from the confluence of three great rivers, we embark tonight on a peaceful journey along the ancient trade routes that connected Cahokia to communities across half a continent, transforming this magnificent city into the economic heart of ancient America. Let your mind drift down river highways where elegant canoes carried precious cargo to distant shores, across prairie paths where traders walked for weeks to reach markets that offered goods from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic coast. Close your eyes and feel the quiet rhythm of ancient commerce, where relationships built on trust and mutual benefit created networks of exchange that unified diverse peoples through the simple human desire to share the abundance and beauty that different regions could provide. Picture yourself standing on the riverbank at Cahokia as dawn breaks over the American bottom, revealing a harbor bustling with peaceful commercial activity that connects this great city to the farthest reaches of ancient America. Dozens of canoes line the shore, some local vessels that have traveled from nearby communities along the Mississippi, others bearing the distinctive construction styles of distant regions, their hulls darkened by weeks of river travel from sources hundreds of miles away. The morning air carries the excited voices of traders greeting old friends, examining exotic goods, and negotiating the exchanges that will carry Cahokian products to markets they themselves may never see. The rivers themselves served as the superhighways of ancient America, creating transportation networks that enabled commerce on a continental scale using only human muscle power and ingeniously designed watercraft. The Mississippi River system, with its major tributaries reaching into the heart of the continent, provided Cahokia with access to resources and markets from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. These waterways carried not just goods but ideas, technologies, and cultural influences that made Cahokia a truly cosmopolitan center of ancient American civilization. The famous copper that adorned elite Cahokians came from the Lake Superior region, over 1,000 miles to the north, where Native American miners had been extracting pure metal from surface deposits for thousands of years. This copper arrived in Cahokia as raw materials, finished ornaments, and semi-processed ingots that local craftsmen could shape into the elaborate ceremonial objects that played important roles in religious ceremonies and social displays. The presence of Lake Superior copper in Cahokian graves and workshops demonstrates trade relationships that connected the great city to the mineral wealth of the far north through networks of exchange that operated reliably for centuries. Marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico, equally distant from Cahokia but in the opposite direction, provided raw materials for some of the most prestigious crafts produced in the ancient city. These shells, particularly the large conch shells prized for their size and acoustic properties, were transformed by Cahokian artisans into cups, gorgets, masks, and beads that became symbols of high social status throughout the Mississippian world. The shell trade required coordination across thousands of miles of territory, involving communities along the entire length of the Mississippi River system in commercial relationships that benefited everyone involved. Watch as Cahokian traders prepare their own expeditions to distant markets, loading their canoes with the distinctive pottery, stone tools, and craft goods that made their city famous throughout ancient America. The standardized Cahokian pottery styles, with their sophisticated shell-tempered ceramics and distinctive decorative techniques, have been found in archaeological sites from Wisconsin to Florida, from Oklahoma to North Carolina, demonstrating the reach of trade networks that carried Cahokian products across vast distances to communities eager to own goods from the continent's most prestigious urban center. The organization required for these long-distance trading expeditions reveals sophisticated logistical planning and social coordination that enabled small groups of traders to travel safely across territories controlled by many different communities. The traders carried not just commercial goods but diplomatic credentials that identified them as representatives of the great city, entitled to safe passage and hospitality from communities throughout the Mississippian world that recognized Cahokia's special status as a religious and cultural center. The seasonal timing of trading expeditions reflected deep understanding of weather patterns, agricultural cycles, and the social calendars of distant communities. Spring departures took advantage of high water levels that made river travel easier, while arriving at distant markets during planting seasons when communities had time for trading activities. Summer expeditions could travel overland across prairie regions when weather conditions were favorable for foot travel. Autumn journeys coincided with harvest festivals that brought together large gatherings where extensive trading could take place. The exotic materials that flowed into Cahokia through these trade networks enabled the city's craftsmen to create objects of unprecedented sophistication and beauty. Obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, with its razor-sharp edges and lustrous black appearance, was shaped into ceremonial knives and ornamental objects that demonstrated both technical skill and access to materials from the far west. Mica from the Appalachian Mountains provided thin, reflective sheets that could be cut into elaborate silhouettes used in religious ceremonies and elite burials. The standardization of weights and measures found throughout Cahokian territory suggests systematic approaches to commerce that ensured fair dealing and built the trust necessary for long-distance trade relationships. Archaeological evidence shows that Cahokian traders used consistent measurement systems for pottery volumes, stone tool dimensions, and other trade goods, enabling accurate exchanges even when direct communication was difficult due to language differences or cultural unfamiliarity. The social aspects of trade involved much more than simple economic exchange, as trading expeditions provided opportunities for cultural exchange, diplomatic contact, and the sharing of technological innovations that enriched communities throughout the network. Traders carried news from distant regions, marriage arrangements between allied communities, and invitations to the great festivals that brought thousands of people to Cahokia for celebrations that combined religious ceremony with extensive commercial activity. The famous Chun-Key stones that enabled the ritual gaming so central to Cahokian social life were themselves trade objects that required specific types of stone available only in certain quarries scattered across the Mississippian territory. The production and distribution of these carefully shaped gaming pieces created specialized craft industries while ensuring that communities throughout the network could participate in the sporting activities that were essential elements of religious festivals and social gatherings. The peaceful nature of Cahokian trade relationships stands in marked contrast to the military conquest and tribute extraction that characterized commerce in many ancient civilizations. Rather than using force to secure resources and markets, Cahokian traders built their networks through voluntary relationships based on mutual benefit, quality products, and reliable service that made them welcome guests in communities throughout ancient America. The technological innovations that emerged from trade contacts enriched Cahokian material culture while spreading improved techniques to distant communities. The shell tempering technology that revolutionized Mississippian pottery production may have originated in coastal regions and spread inland through trade relationships, while agricultural innovations like new crop varieties and improved growing techniques traveled the same routes that carried exotic goods and raw materials. The ritual exchange systems that governed high-status trade involved elaborate ceremonies and gift-giving protocols that strengthened diplomatic relationships while facilitating the movement of prestigious goods. The copper plates, elaborate textiles, and ceremonial weapons that appear in elite Cahokian burials often represent gifts from distant leaders rather than purely commercial transactions, demonstrating the integration of economic and political relationships in ancient American trading systems. The seasonal markets that brought together traders from across the continent created temporary cities where thousands of people could gather for commercial and social activities that lasted for weeks. These gatherings, timed to coincide with agricultural festivals and astronomical events, provided opportunities for large-scale exchanges while enabling the kind of networking and relationship building that sustained long-distance commerce across generations of traders. The decorative motifs that appear throughout Minoan art reflect deep connections to the natural world that sustained their civilization. Octopi with flowing tentacles, dolphins leaping through stylized waves, flowering plants with graceful stems and blossoms, and abstract spirals that echo the movement of wind and water create a visual vocabulary that celebrates life, growth, and natural beauty rather than warfare, domination, or divine intimidation. Religious art in Minoan culture integrated spiritual themes with artistic beauty in ways that made sacred imagery accessible and appealing rather than mysterious or frightening. The famous snake goddess figurines, with their elaborate dress and confident gestures, represent feminine divine power through artistic forms that emphasize grace, wisdom, and protective care rather than wrath or judgment. These ceramic sculptures demonstrate the sophisticated modeling techniques that Minoan artists applied to religious subjects. Jewelry and personal ornaments reveal another dimension of Minoan artistic achievement. Gold diadem with intricate repousse work, delicate filigree earrings, and elaborate pendants decorated with granulation techniques show metalworking skills that rival the finest ancient craftsmanship. The famous bee pendant from Malia, with its realistic rendering of insect anatomy combined with decorative stylization, demonstrates the Minoan ability to find artistic inspiration in the smallest details of natural life. Stone carving reached remarkable sophistication in Minoan hands, particularly in the creation of seals and ceremonial vessels. The famous crystal rhyton from Zakros, carved from a single piece of rock crystal into the form of a bull's head, demonstrates lapidary skills that wouldn't be matched until much later periods. The precision required to carve such delicate forms from hard stone, combined with the artistic vision that conceived these elegant shapes, places Minoan stone carvers among the ancient world's finest artists. Textile arts, while rarely preserved in archaeological contexts, are suggested by the elaborate costumes depicted in frescoes and figurines. The complex patterns, layered construction, and sophisticated tailoring shown in these representations indicate textile production that combined technical excellence with artistic design. The textiles that survive, mainly as impressions in metal objects or as carbonized fragments, suggest weaving techniques and decorative approaches that influenced Mediterranean textile traditions for centuries. The integration of art into architectural spaces demonstrates the Minoan understanding that beauty should be part of daily life rather than reserved for special occasions or elite consumption. Light wells brought natural illumination to painted walls, creating changing effects throughout the day as sunlight moved across artistic surfaces. The placement of frescoes, the selection of subjects for different rooms, and the coordination between painted decoration and architectural features show sophisticated understanding of environmental design. Cultural exchange through trade brought foreign artistic influences to Crete while spreading Minoan artistic concepts throughout the Mediterranean world. Egyptian motifs appear in some Minoan art, while Minoan decorative elements can be traced in pottery and other objects found throughout the Aegean region. This artistic cross-pollination enriched local traditions while maintaining the distinctive character that made Minoan art immediately recognizable. The absence of militaristic themes in Minoan art sets it apart from contemporary civilizations that emphasized warfare, conquest, and royal power in their artistic production. Minoan artists created images of celebration, natural beauty, religious devotion, and social harmony that reflect cultural values emphasizing peace, prosperity, and community well-being rather than individual aggrandizement or military dominance. Modern conservation techniques continue to reveal new details about Minoan artistic methods and materials. Scientific analysis of pigments, binding agents, and surface preparations provides insights into technical procedures that aren't evident from visual examination alone. These studies help preserve existing artworks while deepening understanding of the knowledge and skills that created these ancient masterpieces. The influence of Minoan artistic traditions can be traced through later Greek art, particularly in decorative motifs, compositional approaches, and the integration of natural themes into artistic expression. The marine-style pottery that became popular throughout the Aegean region during the Late Bronze Age shows direct Minoan influence, while architectural decoration in later Greek buildings often echoes patterns and themes first developed by Minoan artists. Digital reconstruction techniques now enable virtual recreation of damaged or fragmentary artworks, allowing scholars and the public to experience Minoan artistic environments as they originally appeared. These technologies provide new ways of understanding how individual artworks functioned within larger decorative schemes and architectural contexts that have been disrupted by time and archaeological excavation. Educational programs introduce students to Minoan art as an example of how human creativity flourishes under conditions of peace and prosperity. The emphasis on natural beauty, technical excellence, and integration of art into daily life provides models for understanding how artistic expression can enhance human experience rather than merely serving political or religious propaganda purposes. Contemporary artists continue to find inspiration in Minoan artistic traditions, particularly in the integration of natural themes. The emphasis on fluid movement and the creation of art that celebrates life rather than power. These modern interpretations ensure that Minoan artistic vision continues to influence creative expression in ways that honor both ancient achievement and contemporary innovation. Museum collections worldwide preserve Minoan artworks that enable millions of visitors to experience the beauty and sophistication achieved by this ancient civilization. The careful presentation of these objects, combined with educational materials that explain their historical and cultural context, ensures that future generations will continue to appreciate and learn from Minoan artistic accomplishments. As we complete this exploration of Minoan art and culture, let your mind rest in galleries where ancient artists created beauty that transcends any particular time or place. The integration of artistic expression into all aspects of life, the celebration of natural forms and colors, and the creation of environments that nourish the human spirit demonstrate timeless principles that continue to inspire and guide artistic creation today. Feel the warm Mediterranean light playing across painted walls where dolphins still leap through eternal seas. Hear the gentle sounds of workshops where potters shape clay into forms of lasting beauty, and sense the profound satisfaction that comes from creating objects that combine practical function with aesthetic excellence. Let this vision of human creativity and the pursuit of beauty guide you toward peaceful sleep, knowing that the urge to create, decorate, and find meaning through artistic expression represents one of humanity's most noble and enduring characteristics. As the gentle Mediterranean wind carries whispers of change across the ancient palaces of Crete, we arrive tonight at one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries. How did Europe's first advanced civilization, after flourishing for over 1,000 years in peaceful prosperity, suddenly fade from the pages of history around 1450 BCE? Let your mind drift through the twilight hours when the great palaces stood empty, their painted corridors echoing only with memories of vanished glory. Close your eyes and feel the weight of time as we explore the various theories that attempt to explain how a civilization so sophisticated, so beautiful, and so seemingly secure could disappear so completely that it became nothing more than legend and myth. Picture yourself standing in the ruins of Knossos on that fateful day around 1450 BCE when the last flames died down and silence settled over what had been Europe's most magnificent palace. The earthquake-damaged walls still bore traces of the beautiful frescoes that had celebrated life for centuries. Dolphins frozen mid-leap through painted seas, elegant court ladies whose smiles would never again grace ceremonial gatherings, young athletes forever captured in their graceful dance with sacred bulls that would never again thunder through these corridors. The mystery deepens when we realize that the collapse wasn't sudden or uniform across all of Crete. Archaeological evidence reveals a complex pattern of destruction and abandonment that unfolded over several generations, suggesting that multiple factors combined to bring down this remarkable civilization rather than a single catastrophic event. This gradual decline makes the Minoan collapse all the more poignant, not a dramatic ending, but a slow fading away of a way of life that had seemed eternal. The most famous theory involves the catastrophic eruption of the Thera volcano, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE. This massive explosion, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded history, sent enormous tsunamis racing across the Aegean Sea while covering vast areas in volcanic ash that blocked sunlight and devastated agriculture. The prosperous Minoan settlement at Akrotiri on Thera was buried completely, preserved like a Bronze Age Pompeii that gives us our most detailed glimpse into Minoan daily life. However, modern archaeological dating has revealed a crucial detail that challenges this volcanic theory. The Great Eruption occurred around 1600 BCE, but the major palace destructions on Crete didn't happen until around 1450 BCE, a gap of 150 years. This timeline suggests that while the Thera eruption severely damaged Minoan power and prosperity, the civilization managed to survive and even partially recover before meeting its final end through other causes. The volcanic disaster did have profound long-term effects on Minoan society. The destruction of Akrotiri eliminated a crucial trading hub that connected Crete to the broader Mediterranean world. The massive tsunamis devastated coastal settlements and harbor installations that were essential to Minoan maritime dominance, while ash fallout damaged agricultural areas that fed the island's population. Perhaps most importantly, the disaster may have shattered the psychological foundations of Minoan confidence, their belief that their peaceful, prosperous way of life was divinely protected and eternally secure. Climate change emerges as another significant factor in Minoan decline. Research suggests that around 1450 BCE, the Mediterranean experienced a series of strong El Niño events that brought drought conditions to Crete and surrounding regions. These climate shifts would have stressed agricultural production, reduced water supplies, and created economic hardships that weakened palace-based administrative systems. A civilization built on agricultural surplus and maritime trade would have struggled to maintain its sophisticated urban centers during extended periods of environmental stress. The rise of the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece provides perhaps the most compelling explanation for the final collapse of Minoan power. These warlike people, with their fortified citadels and bronze weapons, represented everything the peaceful Minoans were not. Archaeological evidence from around 1450 BCE shows clear signs of violent destruction at palace sites throughout Crete, with buildings burned and valuable objects smashed or looted. This destruction pattern suggests organized military campaigns rather than natural disasters or internal unrest. The education and socialization systems that prepared young Cahokians for their adult roles involved the entire community, as children learned essential skills through observation and gradual participation in family and neighborhood activities. This integrated approach ensured that cultural knowledge was transmitted effectively while providing opportunities for young people to discover their talents and interests within the broad range of specialized roles that urban life required. The marriage and alliance systems that connected different family groups within Cahokian society probably involved elaborate ceremonies and gift exchanges that strengthened social bonds while creating the kinship networks that enabled large-scale cooperation. These relationships extended beyond the urban core to connect Cahokian families with communities throughout the American Bottom region and beyond, creating the social foundation for the trade relationships and cultural influences that made Cahokia a continental center. The leadership succession systems that ensured continuity in community governance probably combined hereditary principles with demonstrated competence and spiritual qualification in ways that maintained stability while allowing for adaptation to changing circumstances. The complex nature of Cahokian leadership, involving coordination between religious, economic, and political functions, required individuals with exceptional skills and broad community support rather than simple inheritance of positions. The decline of Cahokian social hierarchies during the city's later period reflects the broader challenges that faced this remarkable urban experiment as environmental stress, population pressure, and external conflicts created conditions that the traditional social organization could no longer manage effectively. The gradual abandonment of elite residences and the simplification of material culture suggest social leveling that may have represented attempts to maintain community solidarity during increasingly difficult times as we observe this complex social organization that enabled ancient America's greatest urban achievement. We witness human wisdom about creating communities that balance individual freedom with collective responsibility, that provide opportunities for achievement while maintaining social cohesion, and that honor both tradition and innovation in the ongoing work of building societies where all members can find meaning and purpose. The peaceful integration of diverse peoples into a functioning urban community, the balance between hierarchy and mobility, and the emphasis on cooperation over competition created social conditions that enabled remarkable cultural achievements while maintaining the flexibility needed to adapt to changing circumstances across centuries of urban life. As the gentle evening mist rises from the great rivers that once sustained North America's mightiest city, we arrive tonight at one of archaeology's most poignant mysteries. How did Cahokia, after flourishing for 3 centuries as a beacon of Native American achievement, gradually fade from the landscape until only grass-covered mounds remain to mark where tens of thousands once lived and celebrated? Let your mind drift through the twilight years of this remarkable metropolis, when the grand plazas slowly emptied and the great festivals grew smaller each passing season. Close your eyes and feel the quiet melancholy of a civilization in transition, where the same human wisdom that built this magnificent city ultimately guided its people toward new horizons when changing circumstances made urban life no longer sustainable. Picture yourself standing in the Grand Plaza around 1200 CE, when Cahokia still bustled with activity, yet subtle signs of change were beginning to appear in the rhythms of daily life. The great festivals still drew thousands of participants from across the continent. The workshops still produced their famous pottery and stone tools, and the agricultural surpluses continued to flow in from the fertile bottomlands that surrounded the urban core. Yet careful observers might have noticed that fewer new construction projects were beginning, that some residential areas seemed less densely populated, and that the confident expansion that had characterized earlier centuries was giving way to a more cautious, protective approach to city planning. The environmental challenges that began affecting Cahokia around this time represent one of the most compelling explanations for the city's gradual decline. Recent scientific research has revealed that Cahokia's remarkable success had been built during an unusual period of climatic stability that kept the Mississippi River system relatively calm and predictable for several centuries. The city emerged and flourished during an era when major flooding was rare, allowing agricultural communities to cultivate the fertile bottomlands without constant fear of devastating inundations that could destroy crops and disrupt urban life. Around 1200 CE, however, this favorable climate pattern began to shift as larger, more destructive floods returned to the Mississippi Valley with increasing frequency. These massive inundations, unprecedented during Cahokia's previous experience, created challenges that the existing social and economic systems were not designed to handle. The agricultural areas that sustained urban populations found themselves repeatedly flooded, while the transportation networks that connected Cahokia to distant trading partners became unreliable when river levels fluctuated unpredictably between devastating floods and problematic droughts. The social tensions that emerged during this challenging period can be traced through archaeological evidence that tells a story of increasing internal conflicts and defensive preparations. Around 1160 to 1170 CE, a large residential compound in the East St. Louis area was burned down in what appears to have been a deliberate act of destruction rather than an accidental fire. The unusual density of exotic materials and ritual objects found in the burned remains suggests this may have represented social unrest related to growing inequalities within Cahokian society. The construction of the first defensive palisade around 1175 CE marked a dramatic departure from the open, confident urban planning that had characterized earlier periods. This massive wooden stockade, rebuilt multiple times over the following century with increasingly smaller perimeters, suggests that Cahokian leaders felt growing need for protection against both external threats and internal dissension. The bastion design of these fortifications indicates they were built for serious defensive purposes rather than mere ceremonial separation of sacred and secular spaces. Recent research has challenged some traditional explanations for Cahokia's decline, particularly theories that blamed widespread drought and agricultural failure. A 2024 study analyzing carbon isotopes in soil samples from the Abandonment period found no evidence of the prairie grass expansion that would have indicated large-scale crop failures. Instead, the ratios of different carbon types remained relatively consistent, suggesting that the diverse agricultural system based on corn, beans, squash, and various native plants continued to function effectively even during supposedly difficult climatic periods. This agricultural resilience reflects the sophisticated resource management strategies that Cahokian farmers had developed over centuries of urban life. Their diversified food production system included not just cultivated crops but also extensive use of wild plants, nuts, freshwater fish, and waterfowl that provided multiple sources of nutrition even when individual components of the system faced stress. The wetlands and food forests that surrounded Cahokia offered resources that could sustain large populations even during agricultural difficulties. The cultural diversity that had been one of Cahokia's greatest strengths during its expansion phase may have become a source of weakness as environmental and social pressures mounted. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city's large immigrant population, drawn from many different cultural backgrounds across eastern North America, sometimes maintained separate burial practices and residential patterns that indicated incomplete integration into a unified Cahokian identity. When stress mounted, these cultural divisions may have made coordinated responses more difficult to achieve and maintain. The gradual nature of Cahokia's abandonment sets it apart from many ancient urban collapses that involved sudden catastrophes or military conquests. Rather than fleeing in panic or being driven out by enemies, Cahokian families appear to have made deliberate decisions to relocate to other regions where opportunities seemed more promising or where kinship connections provided security during uncertain times. This process unfolded over more than a century, with population decline accelerating after 1250 CE but continuing gradually until the urban core was essentially abandoned by 1350 CE. The destinations chosen by departing Cahokians reveal the extensive networks that connected this great city to communities throughout eastern North America. Many families moved south into the Cairo lowlands and the central Mississippi Valley, while others traveled to the Cumberland Basin in central Tennessee. Some joined existing communities, while others established new settlements that carried Cahokian cultural traditions to regions that had never experienced urban life of such sophistication and scale. The transformation of trade relationships during Cahokia's decline period demonstrates how the city's influence evolved even as its political power waned. The elaborate copper plates and engraved shell objects that had been produced at Cahokia began appearing at distant centers like Moundville and Etowah only after 1250 CE, suggesting that master craftsmen may have relocated to these emerging centers while carrying their technical knowledge and artistic traditions with them. The creation of what scholars call the vacant quarter represents one of the most dramatic population movements in North American prehistory. By 1400 CE, not just Cahokia but the entire surrounding region had been largely abandoned, creating an empty zone that encompassed southern Illinois, southern Indiana, western Kentucky and Tennessee, southeastern Missouri, and northeastern Mississippi. This massive depopulation suggests that the challenges facing Cahokia affected the entire regional system that the great city had helped organize and coordinate. Environmental research suggests that this regional abandonment may have been influenced by broader ecological changes that affected not just agriculture but also the wildlife populations and natural resources that sustained scattered communities throughout the area. The return of major flooding cycles may have disrupted not just farming but also the hunting, fishing, and gathering activities that provided essential supplements to agricultural production throughout the region. The peaceful nature of Cahokia's abandonment, without evidence of massive destruction or violent conquest, reflects the cultural values that had always characterized this remarkable civilization. Rather than fighting to maintain unsustainable urban concentrations, Cahokian leaders appear to have made pragmatic decisions to disperse their population in ways that preserved cultural knowledge while adapting to changing environmental and social conditions. The reconstruction of population dynamics through recent archaeological techniques reveals that abandonment wasn't necessarily permanent or complete. Evidence suggests that some population returned to the greater Cahokia region following the initial abandonment, with numbers reaching a maximum around 1650 CE before declining again by 1700 CE. This pattern suggests that the area remained attractive for settlement when environmental and political conditions were favorable. The oral traditions preserved by contemporary Native American communities provide valuable perspectives on Cahokia's legacy and the reasons for its abandonment. Ponca oral tradition specifically remembers their ancestors' time in Cahokia, calling the city Piarzide or Red Hill. These traditions suggest that departure from Cahokia was understood not as failure, but as part of the natural movement of peoples following opportunities and maintaining connections to extended kinship networks. The Deji-Ha-Suan migration patterns that contributed to Cahokia's depopulation demonstrate how population movements in ancient America often followed cultural and kinship lines rather than simple resource availability. The complex social relationships that connected Cahokia to distant communities provided pathways for voluntary relocation that ensured cultural continuity even when political centers shifted or environmental conditions changed. Modern climate research continues to refine our understanding of the environmental factors that influence Cahokia's decline, as scientists analyze tree rings, sediment cores, and other natural archives to reconstruct past weather patterns with increasing precision. These studies reveal that the climate challenges facing Cahokia were part of broader continental patterns that affected many Native American communities during the late medieval period. The legacy of Cahokian achievements lived on in the communities established by its dispersed population, as architectural techniques, artistic traditions, and social innovations developed at the great city influenced regional cultures throughout the Southeast and Midwest for centuries after the urban center itself was abandoned. The mound building traditions, pottery styles, and ceremonial practices that had reached their most sophisticated expression at Cahokia continued to evolve in new settings across eastern North America. As we contemplate the quiet end of North America's greatest pre-Columbian city, we witness not failure but wisdom. The understanding that human communities must sometimes adapt to changing circumstances by transforming themselves rather than clinging to forms that no longer serve their needs. The people who built Cahokia possessed the same intelligence and flexibility that enabled them to create their magnificent city, and they used these qualities to ensure their cultural survival when urban life was no longer sustainable. The mystery of Cahokia's abandonment reminds us that even the most successful human achievements are temporary, shaped by environmental conditions and social circumstances that can change in ways that require fundamental adaptations. Yet the knowledge, skills, and cultural wisdom that created this remarkable civilization lived on in the communities that its people established throughout eastern North America, ensuring that the Cahokian legacy would continue to influence Native American life for centuries to come. As the gentle morning light illuminates the grass-covered mounds that rise peacefully from the Illinois prairie, we arrive at the end of our journey through ancient Cahokia with a story of rediscovery, preservation, and the enduring connections that link this remarkable lost city to our contemporary world. Tonight, let your mind drift across the centuries between abandonment and recognition, when patient archaeologists slowly unveiled the secrets of North America's greatest pre-Columbian metropolis while descendant communities reclaimed their ancestral heritage. Close your eyes and feel the continuous thread of human wisdom that connects the ancient builders of this magnificent city to the modern scholars, tribal nations, and visitors who ensure that Cahokia's legacy will inspire future generations with its timeless message of cooperation, creativity, and harmonious community life. Picture yourself standing atop Monk's Mound on a misty morning in the early 20th century, when European American farmers still plowed around these mysterious earthworks. Without understanding the sophisticated civilization that had created them, The massive pyramid beneath your feet was known simply as Monk's Mound after French Trappist monks who had briefly established a monastery on its summit in the 1800s, but the true identity of its builders remained as mysterious as the morning fog that rose from the ancient rivers below. The scientific rediscovery of Cahokia began in earnest during the 1960s. When interstate highway construction threatened to destroy much of the ancient urban core forever. Racing against bulldozers and construction schedules, archaeologists led by Dr. Warren Whittry conducted salvage excavations that revealed the first clear evidence of the sophisticated urban planning and monumental architecture that had once characterized North America's largest pre-Columbian city. These emergency excavations saved precious knowledge from destruction while establishing Cahokia as one of the continent's most important archaeological sites. The discovery of the Woodhenge solar observatories during these highway rescue excavations revolutionized understanding of ancient American scientific achievements. Dr. Whittry's recognition that seemingly random post holes actually formed precise astronomical instruments demonstrated that Cahokian astronomers had possessed knowledge and skills that rivaled any ancient civilization. The careful reconstruction of Woodhenge 3, with its 48 posts positioned in their original locations, now enables modern visitors to witness the same celestial alignments that guided ancient festivals and agricultural activities over 1,000 years ago. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new secrets about Cahokian civilization without the destructive excavation methods that characterized earlier periods. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and other non-invasive technologies enable researchers to map entire neighborhoods, identify building patterns, and understand urban organization while leaving the archaeological record intact for future study. These advanced methods respect both scientific needs and the concerns of descendant communities who consider Cahokia a sacred site that should be disturbed as little as possible. The recognition of Cahokia as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982 placed this remarkable ancient city alongside the world's most significant cultural landmarks, acknowledging its global importance while ensuring international support for preservation efforts. This designation recognizes Cahokia not just as an American archaeological site but as part of humanity's shared heritage, a place where ancient achievements in urban planning, architecture, and social organization offer insights relevant to people everywhere who seek to understand how human communities can create lasting prosperity through cooperation and environmental wisdom. The modern Cahokia Mound State Historic Site preserves 70 of the original 120 earthen mounds within a carefully managed landscape that enables millions of visitors to experience something of the grandeur that once characterized this ancient metropolis. The interpretive center brings Cahokian daily life to vivid reality through detailed exhibits, interactive displays, and carefully researched reconstructions that help contemporary visitors understand how this sophisticated civilization functioned without overwhelming them with academic complexity. Contemporary Native American communities have reclaimed their connections to Cahokia as an important part of their cultural heritage, with multiple tribal nations recognizing the site as ancestral homeland that continues to hold spiritual significance today. The Osage Nation has taken particularly active leadership in preservation efforts, purchasing the historic Sugarloaf Mound across the river in St. Louis, and working closely with archaeologists to ensure that research respects traditional values while advancing scientific understanding. The collaborative relationship between tribal nations and researchers represents a new model for archaeological practice that honors both scientific inquiry and indigenous rights. Rather than treating Native American communities as subjects for study, modern Cahokia research involves tribal representatives as partners whose knowledge and perspectives enrich understanding while ensuring that ancient sites receive the respect they deserve as sacred places with continuing cultural significance. Recent scientific discoveries continue to challenge earlier assumptions about Cahokian society and its relationship with the natural environment. Contrary to theories that blamed environmental degradation for the city's decline, new evidence suggests that Cahokian farmers maintained sophisticated agricultural systems that sustained large urban populations without causing lasting ecological damage. These findings reveal environmental management practices that offer valuable lessons for modern sustainability efforts. The artistic legacy of Cahokian civilization influences contemporary Native American cultural expression through pottery traditions, architectural techniques, and ceremonial practices that trace their origins to innovations first developed at the ancient city. Modern tribal artists find inspiration in Cahokian designs and motifs while adapting ancient traditions to contemporary contexts, ensuring that the creative spirit that flourished at this great urban center continues to enrich Native American cultural life. Educational programs at Cahokia introduce students from around the world to the achievements of ancient American civilization while challenging stereotypes about pre-Columbian societies. School groups, university classes, and adult learners discover that sophisticated urban life, advanced scientific knowledge, and complex artistic traditions flourished in North America centuries before European contact, expanding their understanding of human cultural possibilities and historical complexity. The peaceful nature of Cahokian society continues to inspire contemporary communities seeking alternatives to conflict-based approaches to social organization. The archaeological evidence of a large, diverse urban population that maintained stability for centuries without massive military establishments offers hope that human communities can achieve prosperity through cooperation rather than competition, environmental harmony rather than exploitation, and inclusive celebration rather than exclusive privilege. Modern preservation challenges require constant vigilance and innovative solutions as urban development pressures, climate change, and natural erosion threaten the remaining archaeological evidence of Cahokian achievements. The careful balance between public access and site protection ensures that future generations will be able to learn. The economic impact of heritage tourism at Cahokia provides sustainable support for preservation efforts, while creating opportunities for local communities to benefit from their stewardship of this remarkable archaeological site. Visitors from around the world contribute to regional economies while gaining appreciation for ancient American achievements, creating positive cycles that support both cultural preservation and community development. The ongoing mystery of Cahokian decline continues to generate new research questions and methodological innovations as scholars seek to understand how environmental, social, and cultural factors combined to transform this thriving metropolis into a memory preserved only in earthen mounds. These investigations provide insights relevant to contemporary concerns about urban sustainability, climate adaptation, and social resilience in an uncertain world. The spiritual significance of Cahokia for descendant communities ensures that this ancient site remains a living place of meaning rather than merely a collection of archaeological artifacts. Native American ceremonies, educational programs, and cultural events at the site demonstrate that the wisdom and values that created this great city continue to guide human communities in their ongoing search for harmony, purpose, and sustainable prosperity as we complete our peaceful journey through the world of ancient Cahokia. We see how the legacy of this remarkable civilization extends far beyond its impressive earthen monuments to influence contemporary understanding of human potential, environmental wisdom, and the timeless values that enable diverse communities to work together in creating something greater than individual achievement. The patient work of archaeologists, the dedication of preservation professionals, and the wisdom of descendant communities ensure that the story of Cahokia will continue to inspire future generations with its demonstration that human societies can achieve greatness through cooperation rather than conquest, creativity rather than destruction, and harmony rather than exploitation of the natural world that sustains all life. The gentle mounds that rise from the Illinois prairie speak across the centuries of dreams realized through community effort, of wisdom gained through patient observation of natural rhythms, and of the enduring human capacity to create beauty, meaning, and lasting prosperity when we choose to work together rather than apart. In studying Cahokia, we discover not just an ancient civilization, but reflections of our own highest aspirations and evidence that the search for harmony, justice, and sustainable abundance represents the most noble and enduring aspect of human civilization.